Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today we have done another one of my favorite things to do. I talked about how I loved to drive south from the city of Anchorage and to see the road as it stretched south and all the beautiful mountains down there. We've actually driven east from the place where I live and from the city of Anchorage, and we are now in the Chugach State Park, just on the fringes of it. We are basically just giving ourselves a little bit of an opportunity to become acquainted with some of the mountains that we're going to be spending a lot of time in during this summer. And so behind me, you can see one of the most famous mountains. It's a little bit covered in a cloud right now, but that will probably sweep over and you'll get different sights as the video goes on. But anyway, that mountain over there is called Flat Top. And Flat Top is probably the most famous hike in Anchorage. If you go to Anchorage, this is basically where you absolutely have to go and climb the mountain just to of course say you've done it, but you'll really enjoy doing it if you get a chance to do that. Today we're going to be having a look together at Psalm 27. Psalm 27. Let's go ahead and read it now. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing have I asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. You have said, seek my face. My heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. Hide not your face from me. Turn not your servant away in anger. O you who have been my help. Cast me not off, forsake me not, O God of my salvation. For my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me in. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me. They breathe out violence. I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. On one occasion in Luke chapter 10, Jesus said to Martha, after she complained about Mary, her sister, listening to Jesus instead of helping out with the meal preparation, he said to her, one thing is needful. One thing is needful, or some versions say one thing is necessary. One thing is necessary, one thing is needful. That's a hard principle to live by. When we think that we need food and clothing and oxygen and shelter, when we think that we need even above and beyond that, education, a retirement, insurance, we think we need so much in life. But the psalmist reminds us of the fact that truly one thing is needful. I like what this psalm portrays because you notice that the psalm portrays a man surrounded by problems. The psalmist describes in verse 2 evildoers and adversaries. In verse 3 he describes an army around him, a war facing him. He describes in verse 6 enemies who are all around him. He describes in verse 10 that he has strained relationships with his family members. He talks about his father and mother having forsaken him. He says in verse 12 that he has adversaries, and that in particular these adversaries are false witnesses, people who are saying things against him that simply are not true. That's a lot of problems. But as he thinks about all of these problems that surround him and that potentially could be his focus and that he could potentially allow to distance him from God or cause him to question God and his ways, he sets those things aside in favor of what is truly necessary and what is truly needful. He answers the question, first of all, in verse 1, who should I really fear? Who should I really be afraid of? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Jesus reminded us of this truth when he said that we should not fear those who are able to destroy the body, but then are powerless. He said we should fear the one who is able to destroy both body and soul in hell. And what he was talking about, of course, is the need to fear or to respect God. But verse 1, the psalmist says that he has made the Lord his stronghold. And so because the Lord is on his side, or rather he is on the Lord's side, he says, who really should I be afraid of? He knows the point that Jesus was making. No one. There is no one to fear but God. He says in verses 4 through 6, or describes in verses 4 through 6, what should I really seek? What should I really try to obtain? He says, one thing have I asked for, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, to inquire his temple. He knows that he will have shelter there. He knows that he will be protected from his enemies there. And so he says, there's one thing that I should really seek for, and that's to dwell with God. He knows that if he seeks that, some of the intermediary things will be taken care of. In fact, in verse 6, he says joy is there. Happiness is there. And how many people think that to be happy or to be joyful is a need? Well, God has joy in abundance. In fact, Paul said, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say, and he says, rejoice. Well, what should I really do is what the rest of the psalm deals with. And there are 3 steps that the psalmist outlines here. He says, what should I really do? Well, number 1, I should pray. And he does that in verses 7 through 9. He says, hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. You have said, seek my face. He says, well, I'm seeking your face. I'm calling out to you in prayer. What should I really do? Number 2, well, I should learn. In verse 11, teach me your way, O Lord. Lead me on a level path because of my enemies. And what should I do? Number 3, verses 13 and 14, he says, I should trust. He says, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And he encourages us to do the same, to have that kind of faith. He says, wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Trust in the Lord, that he will do what is needed. And so again, one thing is needful. It doesn't matter if we are surrounded by enemies, adversaries, armies, wars, people who are bearing false witness, and even family members, even our parents who are turning against us. We shouldn't be concerned with those things. We should be concerned with that one thing that is needful, which is to pursue God, to dwell with him. And if we are pursuing God and dwelling with him, what better thing to do than the 3 things that the psalmist has outlined for us? To pray, to learn, and then third, to trust. May God bless you and bless me as we strive to do those 3 things, and as we strive to dwell in his house forever.